This year, despite a pretty good effort, we didn't produce quite as much compost as we could have. And at this point, we have very little compost available for the garden beds or for compost tea. In order to correct this problem, we plan on extending our outdoor composting efforts through the winter. In prior years, our outdoor composting ended in the fall, and the last additions to the piles were autumn leaves and the remnants of the summer garden. While brown ingredients are plentiful in the winter, thanks to the municipal wood chip pile and an abundance of autumn leaves, green ingredients are in very short supply. So to extend our composting operation into the winter, we would have to come up with an ongoing supply of green ingredients. Despite the fact that there will be no more yard waste, Starbucks typically doesn't provide used coffee grounds during the winter, and almost all of our kitchen scraps will be fed to our red wigglers. And then one day the thought occurred to me, what about spent brewery grains? I first became aware of the use of spent grains as a compost ingredient on Growing Power's website. They collect 48,000 to 64,000 pounds of spent grains per week for their compost and vermicompost. If I had access to spent grains, I'd have enough nitrogenous material to keep our outdoor compost bins going all winter, and I'd have more food for our red wigglers as well. In addition, the grains have a good amount of nitrogen and phosphorus, with an NPK of 1, 0.5, 0.05. They also contain calcium and magnesium. As luck would have it, when I did a Google search of local breweries, I found that a new brewery, Temperance Beer Company, just opened a very short drive from our house. So I contacted them about collecting their spent grains, and they said I was welcome to pick them up at any time. But before picking up the grains, I headed over to the municipal wood chip pile to collect some wood chips. As the grains decay, they smell pretty bad and can attract unwanted pests. So I wanted to have wood chips on hand, not only as a brown ingredient for the compost, but also to cover the grains in order to keep the smell and the pests under control. As usual, I dug deep enough to get wood chips that were already partially decomposed. Next, I drove over to Temperance Beer Company to pick up the grains. Fortunately, the grains that were available were fairly fresh and didn't smell bad at all. There was evidence, however, that microbes were already at work, as the grains were quite hot and giving off steam. I loaded up 5 5-gallon buckets and headed back to the garden. I alternated roughly equal layers of wood chips and grains in 2 of my 3 compost bins. The third bin was already full. To keep the odor under control, I tried to keep the grains from the edges of the bins, so I could cover them on all sides with wood chips. I had enough material to finish filling 1 bin and add 1 bucket each of grains and wood chips to another bin. I will definitely have to add a 4th bin to continue composting through the winter. Minutes after filling this bin, the temperature was 130 degrees Fahrenheit. This isn't surprising considering both the wood chips and the grains were already cooking when I picked them up. That said, it's good to know that microbes are already busy at work breaking down these materials. I'll continue to monitor the temp in the weeks ahead. One consideration is that as winter approaches, there will be fewer and fewer green ingredients for the compost pile. And the wider the variety of ingredients, the better the compost. It's possible that I may be limited to just the spent grains and kitchen scraps that the red wigglers aren't fond of. To increase the diversity of the ingredients, I'll try to convince at least one Starbucks store to continue to supply me with used coffee grounds over the winter. Another consideration is that the goopy texture of the grains will make it difficult for oxygen to permeate the pile, resulting in an anaerobic environment. I'm hoping that pairing the grains with the coarse wood chips will help alleviate this problem, but it's something to keep an eye on. And I may have to turn the pile from time to time to ensure there's enough oxygen. Given their size, it's not likely that our current 3 compost bins will remain active all winter. This doesn't really concern me because the microbes will resume their activity as soon as the temperatures warm up in the spring. The 4th pile that I'll be starting soon will be larger, at least 3 feet by 3 feet, and could potentially remain active during the winter. But again, this is not something that concerns me. I'll continue to accumulate the material, and the pile will be ready to heat up in the spring. And a final consideration is that some of the grains used in brewing beer are allelopathic, which means they inhibit the germination of some plants. I'm not too concerned about this because Will Allen of Growing Power feeds huge quantities of spent grains to his composting worms and uses their castings as part of his seed starting mix. Nevertheless, to be on the safe side, I won't be using this compost in beds where I'm sowing seeds. So by adding spent grains to our arsenal of compost ingredients, I'm hoping we can continue to build compost through the winter and thereby produce enough to meet all of our gardening needs. And in the process do our small part to keep these grains out of landfills. Well, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, remember, you can change the world 1 yard at a time.